Hi, this is Jason with WPGraphiQL, and I want to show you how to extend WPGraphiQL, which is this IDE that ships with WPGraphiQL in the WordPress admin and allows you to explore your GraphQL schema, build queries. You can click buttons to build queries, things like that, and then test your queries and mutations. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to hook into GraphiQL to add a button that has access to some of the state of GraphiQL and allow you to do some stuff with GraphiQL, so you can build extensions on your own. So yeah, let's jump right in. So we're going to cover a couple things here. So first thing. This is going to be JavaScript code that we're writing that extends this. This is a React app that uses React and React State and things like that. And so we need to be able to hook into that. So we need to write some JavaScript. And then the JavaScript is going to have some dependencies. So we need a way to monitor the dependencies and then on-queue those dependencies and the script to WordPress. So we're going to be using a package called WPScripts. Which is going to do our Webpack build for us, pay attention to dependencies that we need, and then if they're actual WordPress core dependencies, it will be able to on-queue those dependencies for us. And then the second thing we need, since we're going to be writing JavaScript that needs to be on-queued to WordPress, we need to write a little bit of PHP to tell WordPress that this plugin exists. So we're going to end up with a plugin that we'll end up with a plugin down here called WPGraphiQL demo that we will activate. So let's start with the PHP. So I'm going to open my code editor here. Let me close all these files here. Okay, so we're going to do a new file, and I have a directory here called WPGraphiQL extension demo. WPGraphiQL extension demo.php. So this is the new file I'm creating. It's just the same name as the directory. You can name it whatever you want. And then we're writing some PHP here. So this is a PHP file. We give it a doc block, and the minimum information we need to define in this doc block is plugin name. And I'm going to say WPGraphiQL extension demo. Okay, so if we go back to our WordPress plugins page, WPGraphiQL extension demo is now there. So you want to be working in a directory, of course, that is available to your WordPress install. So your WordPress plugins are at WP content plugins, and then the directory that your plugin's at. For me, I have a symlink set up, but whatever environment you're comfortable working in. So now we've activated this plugin, but it doesn't do anything. We can test that it is doing something by doing something simple like WP die and just say testing plugin. Okay, so what this is going to do, this is just going to, since the plugin's active, anytime we load WordPress is just going to die with this message. So if I come back to WordPress and click refresh, there we go. So now we know our WordPress plugin is working, but that's not the behavior we want. The actual behavior we want, let me refresh this now. The behavior we want is for some JavaScript to be loaded wherever GraphiQL is being loaded. Okay, so I'll just put that in a comment here. Load our JavaScript wherever GraphiQL is loaded. Okay, so that is our goal. Okay, and so what we can do is hook into add action, and there's a new action called onQueue GraphiQL extension. And we can say function. You can do a named function if you want, whatever makes you comfortable. So what that would look like, a named function, you would just say like onQueue GraphiQL demo or whatever. So you can do it like that, and then you can name your function like this. You can say function. Oh, get the name. I don't know how to paste. Oh man. So function OnQGraphical demo. So now this action only runs on the pages where graphical is being loaded. So now if we do WP die, we'll say testing demo. If I knew how to spell, semicolon. All right, so now if I click around WordPress anywhere else, I can go to the front end of WordPress, I can come to the media library, I can come look at posts, I can come look at media, right? Let me make sure I spelled that right. OnQGraphiQL extension. Yeah, so now if I run this code on the graphical screen, if I did this correctly, there we go. Yeah, so any other page I was on, this wasn't being affected. If I come to the page where graphical is being loaded, all of a sudden our WP die is taking effect. So what we actually want to do now is onQ our demo script. But we don't have our script yet. So let's get that set up. So first thing I'm going to do to set up our scripts is create a new file. We're going to say package.json. And so this is going to allow us to set up our JavaScript environment. So in our package.json, we need to give a name, and we say WPGraphiQL extension demo. Okay, and then we give it. There's a bunch of other information we can give, but we're going to give it some scripts. And the scripts we want is build, and this script is going to be WP scripts build, and then we're going to have start, which is also going to be WP scripts start. Okay, and so one thing we also need to do, I'm going to use yarn, you can use npm, but we're going to add the WP scripts dependency. So we're going to say yarn add dev, and it's at WordPress scripts. Okay, so this is going to go get WordPress scripts from npm, install it as a dev dependency so that we can actually make use of these scripts. So as soon as this is done installing, we'll see it. We'll see this file refresh with our dependency. And so what these scripts do, it allows us to write JavaScript, and then it checks for WordPress core JavaScript dependencies and builds a PHP file to allow us to onQ our script with those dependencies. So I know this is kind of confusing, so as soon as this is done, I'll show you what that looks like in action. Okay, so this package.json, let's see, reload from disk. Okay, there we go. So it added our dev dependency. So we need to do two more things. We need to create a new webpack config, webpack.config. Actually, we might be able to skip that, maybe. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file. We're going to do it at source index.js. So this is going to be our entry point, and I'm going to say alert hello. Okay, and now with this file in place, we're going to say yarn build, and I just want to see if we can do this without customizing Webpack. We might have to go customize Webpack. So when I do yarn build, let me see if this did anything. Okay, yes it did. Great. All right, so WP scripts, if your file exists at source index.js, WP scripts is going to build it for you, and what it's going to do is give you a built file, a built JavaScript file, and a PHP file. So this PHP file is going to give you an array of dependencies and a dynamically generated version number. So we can use this PHP file to onQ our script. So what we're going to do here, we're going to get the asset file data, we're going to say asset file is equal to, and so we're going to include that file. So we're going to say include, and we're going to say plugin dir path. So we need the actual file path to this file. So relative to the file we're in now is build, and then it's index.asset.php. Okay, so we're including that file. What did I missing some syntax here? So we have include file. Oh, sorry, it's not a comma. It's yeah, sorry, it's a concatenation. My bad. So we're getting this asset file, and then I'm just to show you what's happening, WP send JSON. This is just a, I don't know, it's like bar dumping or whatever you like to do. It's just a little quick debug tool. So what's going to happen is on our pages with GraphiQL, we're going to get this asset file, and then we're just going to send up that asset file data as JSON, just so you can see what's happening. So if I refresh here, we see our asset file is being output, right? As JSON. So very cool. So what we need to do is WP onQ, and we could be potentially even more responsible and register the script first to allow plugins and whatnot to deregister and things like that, or replace the registry. But we're just going to jump straight into WP onQ script. You can look at the difference between register and onQ another time. But so we're going to say WP graphical extension demo. So that's the name of our script that we're onqueuing, and then we have to give it a path. So we have to say where. So this has to be, unlike the plugin directory path or the file path, we have to do the public URL. So we're going to say plugins URL, which is the public URL to our plugins, and then we say build index.js, and that's relative to this file. And then let's see. Oh, I think this goes inside of here. All right, and then we need to declare the dependencies. So this is where we can do the asset file dependencies. So any dependencies. So any dependencies here that get defined will now be included, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then we need the version. So we say asset file version. So this is going to allow us to have a dynamic version that's updated every time we build our scripts. So very cool stuff. And then we say true, and this outputs it in the footer. So we're hooking into pages that GraphiQL is running on. We're onqueuing our script. We're including dependencies in the PHP file and the version from the PHP file. And I'll show you what those dependencies look like in a second, and why this is pretty cool. So now that we have some JavaScript here, we see that it's being built here. Right now it's the exact same because we didn't write anything interesting. So let's change that. I want to build a component, a React component. So we're going to say const demo button is equal to just a function. And so this is very similar to writing normal React if you're familiar with React. And so we can return something. And so I'm just going to say return button. And we'll say demo button. Okay. So this is going to build a button. And we can then hook this button into GraphiQL. And so let me pull up real quick what we need to do. Okay, so we have a hooks GraphiQL the core plugin. Let me refresh this now. There should be, yeah, our alert should be running. Yeah, which I kind of skipped over, but our code for that for the alert was actually running. But what we can do is look here. We have WPGraphiQL and in the window, and this exposes some things that we can hook into. So it has a context provider. It exports the graphical component. It exports a function to get the endpoint. and then it exports hooks, and then I use an app context hook. So the hooks are like WordPress PHP hooks and filters. So what I'm going to do here is access those hooks. We're going to say const hooks is equal to WPGraphiQL. So from the window, we're accessing this WPGraphiQL hooks function. And so what we're going to do is hook in. We're going to say hooks dot add filter. And then the filter we're hooking into is a filter called the graphical toolbar after buttons. Okay. And then in PHP and JavaScript hooks, this is a little bit different. So you give the name of your filter or action that you're hooking into, but then in JavaScript you have to give it a namespace as well. So we're going to call this graphical extension demo, and then you have the actual callback. So this is going to give us, since it's a filter, there's going to be a response or data or whatever it is that we have to return, and then we also get some arguments, or in this case we're going to call it props. So we get the response and the props, and since it's a filter, we have to return a response, right? This is similar in PHP filters. If you don't return, weird things happen. So in our case, this filter is an array. So we're going to say res.push. We're going to push our demo button to this array. And there's no children on this, so I'm just going to delete that and we'll close it right away. So yeah, so what's happening, we're going to hook into a graphical toolbar after buttons hook, and then we're going to filter in our demo button. And so if I run yarn start on our package, this is going to listen for changes in our JavaScript. So this JavaScript that we just changed is going to be rebuilt. Our alert is going to go away. And if I refresh here, we should, if I did this correctly, we should have a button show up. Let's see. Yeah, demo button. Here we go. Whoops. Okay, so our demo button is here. But as you can see, the styles are actually kind of a little bit different. And the reason for that is that the other buttons use an actual button called graphical button. And so if I have React DevTools installed, and so if I come up here actually, let me click on our button. We can see, let me actually pass some props to it. So we get the props from our filter. If I pass these props down to the button, wait for it to rebuild, we see that it rebuilt. I can now refresh my screen. It doesn't have hot module reloading. That might have been, I don't know if that's a config I don't have set up properly, or just limitation of WP scripts, but I have to actually refresh the browser. But what we can see now is that using React DevTools, this demo button component gets props graphical, uppercase graphical, the component, and then lowercase graphical, some functions passed to it. And if we look at these other components here, we can see that these are actually instances of graphical toolbar buttons. And so what we can do now, instead of button, we can get graphical out of the props, and then we can say I want graphical dot button. Okay, and graphical button, instead of having a child as the label, it has an actual prop called label. And I'm doing a template literal because we're going to actually use it to show something in a second. So we're saying we want it to be graphical button with a label of demo button. And now if I refresh, it'll have the exact same styles as the other buttons because now it's a graphical button. So that's cool. So now I'm hooking in, we're actually hooking into graphical, right, with a WordPress plugin. So if I go to my plugins and deactivate this demo plugin and then come back to graphical, our demo button is gone. But if I come back to the plugins, activate the demo plugin, and then come back to graphical, our demo button's there. So now WordPress plugins can extend graphical. So let's look at some of the other cool features going on here. So let's take advantage of using some state. So WordPress exports WP element as kind of like React basically. So we can say const use state is equal to wp.element. So this is like a global that WordPress exposes, and it's basically React, right? So we can say const, const, and I'm gonna just say count. We're gonna add like a counter to the button and set count, okay, is equal to use state. So now I can use state, and we're just gonna say the default is 0, and when we click this button, so let's display the count, and then on click, when we click this button, on click is equal to, and this will be a function. So on click, we'll set count to count plus 1. Okay. So what this is going to do, we're going to have it'll say demo button 0. When we click it, it will take the count, which is 0, and add 1 to it. So then the count would become 1, and then it would become 2 and 3 and 4 every time we click the button, right? So now we're using state. So let's see it in action, and then I'll show you what happened with WP scripts. So we have demo button, and I can click it, boom, count is going up every time I click it. So we're successfully using state like we would in a normal React component. But what's really cool here, if I do yarn build, what's going to happen is it's going to detect that we're making use of WP element, okay? And in our index.php, it adds that as a dependency here. So then when we're on-queuing it, we're on-queuing the appropriate dependencies. So then our JavaScript bundle doesn't have to include another version of React. It's allowing us to use the version of React that ships with WordPress core, which is exposed as WP element. So pretty cool reason to use WP scripts is so that we can take advantage of features like that, so that we don't have to like install different versions of React for every plugin that we're building. So so very cool. So some other things I want to show. I'm gonna take this, and we're gonna just have props come through to this component. So we're gonna refactor this just a tad bit, and we're gonna say const GraphiQL is equal to props. Because what I want to show is just another way. If you don't have React Dev Tools, this is one thing you could do. You could say console.log props. So anytime we click the button, we can see what is getting passed from props, from this filter down to the component. So what can we access from this button? Okay. So if let me yarn start, because I did a build. If I do yarn start, let this get going again. Then as soon as this gets started, okay, so there we go. Do a hard refresh again. I'm going to open up my console in the browser. And if I click this button, what we should see, yep, so now the props are being logged. So we see graphical coming through, and there's graphical the component, and then there's some graphical functions, okay? So we're making use of graphical the component to get the button, but we can also make use of graphical the functions, which will let me do things like graphical dot handle run query. So I can control graphical behavior and actually run a query. So if I did this right, I might have screwed up my syntax, but let's take a look. So what should happen now, our demo button should do 3 things. It should increase the count, it should console log the props, but then it should actually run this query in graphical. Okay, there we go. So now I just created an extension that extends this toolbar with UI, but also also extends, the UI. It makes use of UI passed from GraphiQL, but then also actually controls the behavior of GraphiQL. So there's other things we can do, like we can do GraphiQL dot handle. I think it's handle toggle history would be one, and GraphiQL dot handle toggle docs, I think, if I remember correctly. So we can refresh that with those changes. And now if I click it, a lot of things are going to happen. The history panel should toggle, the docs panel should toggle, the count should increase, we console log, and we execute the query. So let's see. There we go. So I clicked it, the count increased, the history panel toggled, the query executed, and the documentation also toggled. So I can click it again. History and documentation should close. There we go. And the query re-executed. So that's just a quick rundown of some of the fun things you can do with honestly very minimal code to extend WP Graphical with your own plugins. So you can create your own panels like this, like Explorer, so you can look at the code at how that's done. Actually, you know what? Let's just look at building the panel like that real quick, just so you can see it, because I think that's going to be a common case. So let's just do that real quick. So we'll say hooks.add filter, and so we're going to hook into GraphiQL. What is it? GraphiQL after GraphiQL. Clever name. And then, so this is going to be also we need to give it a namespace. And we're going to say GraphiQL extension demo. And this is the same thing. It's going to have a response and some props, I believe. And so we get that response. And the response is also going to be an array. So we need to push whatever we want. So always return the response, and then you make your additions to it. So we're going to say res.push, and in this case we're just going to give it a div, and we're going to say demo panel or whatever. And I'm just going to give this some styles real quick. So this is going to be one of the panels. I'm just going to say max width is like 300 pixels. For now, you can do whatever you want with this. But so what this is going to do, this is going to actually create a panel after GraphiQL, okay? And so we can look here, and here we go. Here's our panel. Let me make this like an H2 or something that doesn't just like line break right away, or a word break or whatever. Give us a little more dimension so you can see it. Cool. Well, it still word broke, whatever. I don't know how CSS works. Anyway, so you can see the demo panel over here. So that's how all these panels work, right? We have these docs, we have the panel that shows over here, we have the Explorer that shows over here, we have the history. So these are all panels that show before or after GraphiQL. So we can hook in and build our own panels, right? And then you could use context, you could use whatever. I'll show you real quick how to expose some context. So we can say const app context is equal to use app context, and if we go back to the console and come into WP Graphical, we'll see that exposed in here is this use app context. So we're gonna get that use app context from WP Graphical, much like we got the hooks. And what we're gonna do here, we're gonna export, or we're gonna display this in our components. So we're gonna create a pre tag JSON.stringify. So we're gonna stringify the app context, okay, and null 2. So this is for formatting. So we're gonna take the app context that is passed for GraphiQL, the app context. We're gonna get that as JSON. We're gonna stringify it and output it in a little code block in this panel, and so we'll be able to see what data we can get, right? So we can use app context to get the schema. So you see, as the fetch happened, the schema was updated. We have the actual query documents. Like if I make changes here, you can see it change over here. I can start typing here, test, and you see the context over here, update. So we have access to app context, and we can build some really cool things, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool what we can do. So let me actually give this what is it, overflow, and we want it to be scroll, because right now I can't actually see all these props, they're getting cut off. So if I give it overflow scroll, when that schema loads, so what's happening, it fetches, it gets the schema, and then it sets it. So now I can scroll. So now I have access to the schema. I see all the results of the schema. I have the query params, so like what's actually up here. So like I can see, is Explorer open, is true or false. So we can toggle that, and now I can see Explorer open, true. I can close it, false, right? It's pretty cool. I can like change this. We see the query params are different now. The schema's all there, so I can do some really cool stuff with this. I can set the query. I can read the queries, so, right? Test. So as I'm typing, like you see, yeah. Anyway, lots of cool stuff we can do here, and I'm excited to see what the community builds with this. Have fun with it.